Everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for joining us the Wellness Revolution webinar tonight. My name is Bodee Avery. I am organizer and contributor to the Wellness Revolution Facebook page. So if you haven't already, please get on Facebook and give us a like. We really want to create a forum really to empower you on the Facebook page, to empower you to discover not only your physical potential, empower you physically through transformation, and also give you nutritional goals and nutritional empowering habits that make you feel better, give you energy, and that in tune will create an atmosphere for you to really change your life in so many ways. And so we want to create a page that's going to incorporate all that. That's going to come from you feeling better and looking better. We want to empower you to emotionally, mentally, give you the tools to maybe find calm and harmony in places that you haven't been able to find before. So, and also give you the tools to find natural healthcare solutions, to take that power back into your life, your family's life, and give you the tools you're going to need to deal with this crazy healthcare situation we have in America right now. But most of all, I think we want to empower you with freedom, with that newfound energy and transformation. There really comes a freedom in discovering what your goals are and maybe choosing a career that you didn't think you could do in the past, and really reaching out and stretching your boundaries. And so we want to create a forum that's got that kind of information and give you those little nuggets through our Facebook page. So tonight we have a great presenter and really a great topic that I feel like is really the starting point for anybody that is trying to get in shape or take control of their health, and that is sugar. It's such a powerful problem in our world today, and today we have a presenter that really is one of the experts in the industry, and he happens to be my brother, so we're lucky to be able to access his knowledge about this topic. So Drew, are you there?
I'm here. Hello, everyone.
Everyone, this is my brother Drew. So he is one of the experts in the industry, and I will list a few of the credentials, although I'm his brother, so having to go through this list of credentials to kind of prop him up, that just kind of...
Thanks, bro. Appreciate that.
It's tough to do. I want everybody to know really the background and the expertise that he brings to the table. Drew is the 1997 EAS Grand Spokesman Transformation Champion. Made a great transformation. Man, that was 18 years ago. That's a long time. But really, that is the power in it, that he made a great transformation back in 1997, made great strides, but he's also been able to incorporate that lifestyle for these 18 years and really show people how to do it and how to stay fit throughout your middle ages into your old age. And so that's really the power and what he brings to the table as far as knowledge goes in the industry. Drew's been featured in Muscle Media magazine. He's been he's been in Men's Health, Men's Fitness. He authored a training booklet that was entitled How I Lost 22 Pounds of Fat and Gained 10 Pounds of Muscle. That training booklet had 500,000 in distribution. It was just great, and it changed a ton of people's lives. It was great, and I think that's probably what you're most known for, is that little booklet that came out there. But also, Drew's been seen on Entertainment Tonight, Access Hollywood, and the Crazy Howard Stern Show. So he's made his rounds across the Hollywood scene. But currently, Drew's really focused in two areas: helping people over 40 achieve amazing health transformations, and also really dealing with and focusing on sugar. Drew's got a new product. We probably won't get in it tonight, but he's got a product that's dealing with sugar cravings in a whole new way that many people probably hadn't heard of or thought of. It's really kind of cool. So we might touch into that a little bit tonight, but probably not. We're going to delve into mainly probably the biggest and most devastating problem that people don't even know about and they really aren't paying attention to, and that is sugar. So, Drew, I will turn it over to you and let you roll.
Bodee, thank you. You missed something in my credentials. I also, for listeners, am the backyard tennis champion of the family. So
Wrong.
that's one of my one of my most prized awards there. So. Anyway, thanks for having me, Bodee. I'm honored that you'd have me on the very first show. So I think this is going to be one of many, many, shows that cover unique topics and maybe covering things in a slightly different way. And I hope that this kind of sets the stage. Tonight's talk sets the stage for that very thing. Bodee, as you mentioned, sugar's a problem, and I think people are generally aware. I think there's been enough coverage in the media now that there's information saying, hey, it appears sugar's a problem. But what I've found as I've researched this topic for years now and put together this product and also working on a book is that although people generally know there's a problem, they just don't know the magnitude of it. And so what I'd like to do in tonight's show is really going to change the way I normally present this topic, where I'm talking about strategies for dealing with your sugar cravings and ways to change your eating habits to deal with that. And I want to approach it slightly differently because I found that I can provide all this great information, but in general, what's happening is if people really don't buy off on the fact that sugar's a problem, they're just not motivated to implement those strategies. So what I'm going to do tonight is take a page really from the tobacco industry. And if everybody remembers, the tobacco industry really didn't, the anti-smoking campaigns really didn't start getting some traction until they uncovered the real facts about what smoking was doing and looking at and actually showcasing some of the end results, people with cancer and some of those type of things. And so I'm going to go down that path tonight and really drill down on this topic from a standpoint of giving people a really in-depth look at what's going on with sugar from a statistical standpoint and from a scientific standpoint. So I'm going to be throwing some statistics and some studies at you. Please be patient. I think you'll find them that will really, at least I hope, do something that it's unique, and that is when people listen to this topic, they kind of move on with their day saying, yeah, sugar is a problem. But I want you to leave this podcast today, webinar, with a completely different view of sugar and the importance of addressing it in your life. So what I'd like to do first is just kind of touch on this. Actually, let me back up a little bit. I think one of the things I'd like to do real quick is just tell people how I got involved with this. As Bodee said, I was a transformation contest winner. It opened the door for me to then coach people on transformation. And I found something very interesting that happened over the years, and that was that as time went on, people were having an increasingly difficult time staying with the diet. And the diet is really about 80% of the success for a transformation program. And it was becoming increasingly frustrating for me because I would have people come to me and say, man, I'm really excited, I want to change my life, I want to get in great shape. And then 3 to 10 days into the program, they had already wrecked, and they were off the nutrition program. And I found this was getting increasingly worse. When I started to really look into this subject, I found that the culprit was ultimately sugar cravings. I think it was I couldn't determine why at the time, but something was happening where these sugar cravings were just so invasive and so powerful that it was overcoming that willpower. So again, that really began me on my journey, and from there it ultimately led me to as Bodee mentioned, I'm working on a product which, again, I don't think we'll talk about today. I really want to get into the meat of what's going on in the sugar industry. But it opened a whole world of information to me that I think it is not getting out to the general public. So I think you'll find, especially near the end here, I bet it's a real shocker for you that I think will cap off this this talk nicely. So, Bodee, I don't want to steamroll you here. You have any questions before I jump in on the topic?
No, I think you're doing good. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Okay. Um, I wanted to again touch on the tobacco industry again because there's a lot of similarities. And at first glance, you may say, "Hey, Drew, are you kidding me?" I mean, that's a pretty overreaching statement to compare tobacco with sugar. I mean, let's face it, sugar's pleasurable. It tastes great. It's in all our foods. And so it's tough to compare it to smoking. Smoking, the smoke smells bad. You're burning a carcinogenic agent in your lungs. You feel almost immediately ill when you smoke. But that's in life. That's the problem. Is that where smoking is so obvious, sugar consumption isn't. And yet, in today's talk, you're going to see that it's every bit, maybe even more devastating. And when you look at the smoking statistics, about 480,000 people die a year of smoking-related deaths. That's a relatively recent figure. Now compare that to 520 that die of obesity-related issues and obesity-related disease. And you may say, well, is obesity a direct correlation to sugar? And
hey, Drew,
I'm going to show you where it is.
520,000? Is that 500?
Yeah, 520,000. 520,000 deaths are related to obesity and obesity-related diseases. And so what you're going to hear tonight is the direct link, scientific proof. It's irrefutable at this point that the sugar consumption is directly related to obesity and these diseases and what it's doing to us. And before I kind of leave the topic of comparing it to tobacco, one thing that adds credence to this comparison is, I don't know if you guys remember, but in the news there was an attorney by the name of Stan Glantz. And Stan Glantz was the attorney that literally brought down the tobacco industry because he uncovered documents that confirmed that the tobacco industry absolutely knew that their product was doing damage and was harmful and dangerous. Well, Stan is that the attorney that did that is also now involved at going after the sugar industry for the exact same reason. He's found documentation that goes back 30 years that confirms what the sugar industry has tried so hard to hide, that the product is very damaging to the body, in fact toxic. And so that is his new crusade. So again, I think looking at the sugar industry as a reasonable model for us is not overreaching. So let me get right into the statistics of this all. When I originally talked about putting together this talk, I picked the name Sugar Tsunami to really talk about it, and it really is apropos for what's going on here. Sugar consumption is literally spiraling out of control. It's shocking to know that Americans are eating 2,000% more sugar than they did in the 19th century. And I'm asking everybody as I'm going through these stats, just don't let them go in one ear out and out the other. Really listen to what I'm saying here. When I say 2,000% more, that's when you, from a biological viewpoint, that's such a great change in our nutrition pattern. We cannot adapt to that very quick from an evolutionary standpoint. So throwing that into our diet so quickly is extremely damaging. The average American is eating 26 teaspoons of sugar a day, yet the American Heart Association says a woman should be around 6 and a man should be at around 9. So we're looking at 3 to 4 times every day the amount of sugar that really is noted as being the upper level of being healthy. We're 3 to 4 times that. And the truth is, if you look at what teenagers are doing, they're in the 30s and sometimes 40 teaspoon ranges a day. And as we get a little farther into this, you're going to see how that's completely possible. Sugar is in approximately, at this point, 98% of our processed foods. So it's very difficult to get away from this. I mean, you, you think, well, I'm just going to have a slice of pizza. Well, Pizza Hut has like 2 teaspoons of sugar per piece. I mean, things that you wouldn't even think have sugar are loaded with sugar. Sugar accounts for about 500 calories extra that we eat a day. So if you look at what the typical calorie amount is of our meals, it's going to be anywhere from, let's say, 350 to 600. It's like you're having one meal of sugar every day.
That's phenomenal.
Again,
That's crazy.
it's mind-blowing if you stop and think about it. When you look at all the additives that are in the market today, we eat 10 times, and sugar is an additive, by the way. We're eating 10 times more sugar than any other additive on the market. And it turns out now that sugar is our #1 source on average, #1 source of calories per day. Now, this is what is ridiculous about it all. Sugar is in everything. It's in virtually everything that we're eating. It's just on a continual basis. And yet, if you look at sugar from a nutritional standpoint, it has no food value. It has no vitamins, no minerals, no enzymes, and no fiber. And yet, it's being jammed in these foods. Why? It's inexpensive, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, it's highly addictive. And it's the perfect ingredient that food manufacturers love to put in their food so that people keep coming back for more. So that's in general, when you look at what we're eating, that's kind of a good overview. Now let's look at from an obesity and disease standpoint. When we talked about the tobacco industry, they said, well, when you're smoking, you have all these ancillary diseases. Well, now let's look at what the sugar is doing to our bodies from an obesity standpoint and disease standpoint. At this point, all the credible studies are proving, really at this point, without a shadow of a doubt, that sugar is the primary culprit in all these diseases. In fact, it is ironic that if you look at when they've started keeping stats from 1970 to now, you can track for our sugar consumption from 1970 till now, and heart attack, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and now Alzheimer's is tracking directly with sugar consumption. And interestingly enough, if those of you that really pay attention to health-related issues in the news, isn't it interesting that for the last probably close to 10, 15 years, we've been told that fat's the problem. And now it's been completely turned on its head, because we now know it's not fat. They took all the fat out of the foods, put sugar in there and replaced it, and obesity exploded.
Hey, I was reading one thing. I'm going to throw this in there just because you brought up Alzheimer's. Is that there's a study that I just read that a ketogenic, diet, which maybe you can explain that a little better, is basically a no-carb diet, is helping, and they're finding actually reversal in Alzheimer's because of the no sugar. Your body's burning your fat inside, and you're not eating the sugar, and that's one of the main reasons I think they're showing a reversal in the Alzheimer's with this ketogenic diet. So I just thought I'd put that out there. I just read that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I will cover it a little bit more shortly, but the interesting thing is they're now saying that Alzheimer's is essentially diabetes of the brain.
Mm.
And it makes sense then if you start cutting, if you look at the ketogenic type diets, they're not loading you down with sugar, and so you can start seeing where that makes total sense. And again, what we're finding is, even though the science is proving it out, it's very logical. I mean, it tracks so nicely with sugar. All these diseases track so nicely with sugar consumption. It doesn't take a leap of faith to realize that really is the primary factor that's driving all this. I mean, right now, 2/3, that's 2 of every 3 Americans, are either overweight or obese. That's 200 million people. Now, again, I've heard that stat so many times, it just goes in one ear out the other, but I tell people to stop and just think about that for a minute. What other disease would we allow on this planet that would in some way affect 2/3 of the population? We'd be up in arms if it was a virus or any other kind of ailment that was affecting 2/3 of the population. We would be really, again, more aggressively attacking it. But at this point, at least, it's not being addressed effectively, and the end result of this is childhood obesity. We just talked about adult obesity being 2 in every 3. Childhood obesity has tripled since 1970. I mean, our kids they're smaller. Their systems can't even handle the sugar as well as ours, and you can just start thinking they're really taking the brunt of this high sugar diet in the cereals, in the energy drinks, in the sodas, in the juices. And so, again, it makes total sense that the obesity rate for children is tripled. And there was an anthropologist on TV the other day that said something related to sugar in a way I hadn't caught it. And he said, in the history of mankind, there's never been an obesity issue as we've seen in the last 30 years. So we're really charting new ground here, as human civilization is charting new ground, simply because they're kind of really not addressing they're irresponsibly just feeding the public on what maybe be economically feasible, but it's not. It's throwing total disregard to human health. At the current pace, what we're seeing today, 95% of Americans will be overweight or obese by the year 2050. That's if we do nothing today. By 2050, 95% of the population will be overweight or obese. So these are the kind of things that people normally in their everyday lives, they say, well, I maybe have a problem with sugar a little bit, but it's not a little bit. I mean, as a society, we are getting devastated. And it's getting to the point now where it's just beyond weight gain. Now disease is coming into play. There's one other point I think I wanted to make before I talked a little bit more about the diseases, and that is people have said, well, how do you know that sugar is directly linked to fat? And I don't know if those, they did a fantastic piece on 60 Minutes. Dr. Sanjay Gupta showed where they used a chromograph and a mass spectrometer, and they were able to separate fats in kind of a special oven they had. And what they found was that it showed without a doubt that sugar got turned into a specific kind of fat. And it showed in particular that the high fructose corn syrup is getting turned into the worst kind of fat, that very dense cholesterol that clogs the arteries. And so when you compare this sugar to what the fat it produces and the bad fat it produces to fat, sugar far surpasses fat in damaging the body and causing serious cardiovascular disease. And on a side note, and again it makes total sense, is they're finding that the sugar, especially high fructose corn syrup, stores particularly well in the fat, in the stomach. So that belly fat that we're seeing, pervasive in the industry or in the world, is really due in large part to this high sugar consumption, because that's where it goes. That's where your fat, when you're eating high levels of sugar, typically stores. And that's why it causes liver damage and some of the other organ damage that is tied to the diseases that we'll be talking about. I think this might be the time to go into some of the diseases. And I think what's important to point out here is that it's so easy. I know I've been on a lot of these podcasts where I've listened to so-called experts, and they spout, all these facts, or they think are facts, and ultimately it's a bunch of theory. They're maybe trying to push a product or an agenda. What I'm talking about here is there's no agenda. It's not theory. It's not me trying to get on a soapbox. This is based on solid science. And again, it's just why it's so important to hear this message, because this is impacting all of us. It's impacting our children. When we talk about diabetes, there's a study out that looked at 175 countries around the world, and it was shown that sugar consumption was a clear predictor of diabetes rates. And here's the crushing one. I mean, when I did the research on this, this was shocking, that the American Diabetes Association said that the type 2 diabetes in children and young adults was at epidemic levels. They're saying now that the type 2 diabetes has changed from being the disease of our grandfathers and parents to our children. In 1980, there was zero. 1980, there were 0 cases of type 2 diabetes, adolescent type 2 diabetes. 2010, there were close to 60,000.
Did you say 1980, Drew?
Did I say? I should have said 2000. Yes, 1980, there were 0 cases.
That's crazy.
In 2010, there's close to 60,000. Now, if somebody's going to sit there and say, no, that's just coincidence, or no, sugar doesn't have any impact, it's just crazy talk, and that's why it's so important to get this information out, because it's not just, we stopped selling tobacco to our kids. Because we said, hey, that's just not good. And yet we have clear indicators that our children, even children, if you think about it, when we were young, we always had those kids in high school or the junior high, they were the smokers, they were the hoods or whatever. Well, these kids were smoking, and they didn't look like they were being damaged that much, quite frankly. I mean, if you think about it, the negative effects of smoking on the young kids really didn't show itself at that time. Yes, the damage was occurring, and yes, that started kind of manifesting later years. But I'm talking right now, if you look at the kids today, they're obese. They've got arterial plaque buildup, and they've got diabetes. So when I say sugar's a problem, this isn't something that manifests down the road. This is something our kids are dealing with now, and now it looks like our kids will be the first generation that won't outlive us if it continues at this rate.
Well, and I know, Drew, you've seen, and I see it all the time, when I'm around adolescents and even sports activities. I see, it's kind of separated group now. You have your athletes, but the kids that aren't athletes really are, their body formations and their fat. I mean, I see it, just because, and I think it goes back to several things, just inactivity, but also, I mean, all these, and I'm sure you're going to touch on it later, what we're consuming is just, they can't process it correctly.
Well, no, and I mean, when you look at, again, the sheer amount, and that's going to be what I say, near the end of the talk, we're going to get into some real-world stuff, because all this is just numbers, but this kind of sets the stage, and I'm going to give people a real-world look at what I mean when people are over-consuming sugar. So just to round out the diabetes topic, they're saying right now that at the current rate, again, making no change, 1 in 3 Americans will be diabetics. Now, diabetes is a rather serious disease. If you talk to anybody who's a diabetic, I mean, they're taking insulin shots. I mean, it's really not an enjoyable disease. Can you imagine every 3rd person having that? I mean, these are shocking numbers. They're saying now that again, changing nothing, if we just change nothing, by 2026, our entire healthcare system expenditures will have to go just to diabetes alone. I mean, again, I don't know how many times we have to get hit over the head here, but most people they're just not given this information, or they're not giving it, in one fell swoop to really be able to internalize what's going on here.
Well, and real quick,
moving on to heart. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in real quick, because, I mean, you hear these studies, and they do that with global warming and all this stuff, but you can intuitively, like with global warming, I mean, you can't feel the difference. I mean, people kind of know that that's, at least in my opinion, a bogus theory. But anyway, with kids and diabetes and obesity, you can see it. I mean, it's not like, everybody kind of intuitively, we know we're consuming too much sugar. You know what I'm saying? So these studies are not, to me, out of whack or some bogus inflated theory. I think. I mean, I feel it in today's society.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And the fact is, if you want to compare global warming, it takes elaborate computer models to kind of figure out what's going on here. We're past that with the human studies. We not only have trends over the last 30 years that's tracked directly, but as I said, we've got now data coming from actually a wide array of institutions now. One of them, which was featured on 60 Minutes, that can show definitively that sugar is a toxin, and it is linked to obesity, and it is directly tied to diabetes, which is now growing at epidemic levels, obesity growing at epidemic levels. And now we look at heart disease. There was a 15-year study done, and it found that participants who took just 25% or more of the calories as sugar were twice as likely to die from heart disease. Those that dropped it down to 10, it cut the odds in half. So, I mean, sugar is that powerful where just 10% differences can make dramatic effects on your heart, on your longevity. I think there was a study, yeah, it was University of California, Davis. I think his name was Dr. Kimberly Stanhope, and she did a 5-year groundbreaking study that showed a direct link between high fructose corn syrup and heart disease. And in fact, what made her study so unique was that she was able to show arterial plaque buildup in 2 weeks. She put her participants on a 25% high fructose corn syrup liquid for 2 weeks, and they started showing the low, the high density, the bad cholesterol starting now to build up in the arterial system. And surprisingly enough, drinking the liquid was worse than eating a cheeseburger on the body. And again, just another thing that points to the power of sugar and what it's doing to us. But she made a very interesting comment that I wrote down because it hit me rather hard, and that is, she said that she works for companies on testing food additives and ultimately trying to determine if they're safe or not. And here's her quote: "If I had the results as strong, meaning showing all these negative ramifications with regard to a brand new additive, and I started producing these results, meaning these negative test results, the additive would be immediately pulled off the market." Now, that's shocking, because what we're hearing is that something right now that if we were testing it as a new additive, it would never make it on the market today. It's 98% of all of our foods. Again, it's hard to get your mind wrapped around this, but when you start putting all these pieces together, I think the word tsunami is again correct. It's all over the place. It's just getting to the point where it's very difficult for people to even deal with the problem because it's in all these different foods.
Hey, Drew, and you might touch on this later, but I guess people too, they don't realize the sugar you're talking about today is not the sugar that was 20, 30 years ago. That's the thing too, is the sugar, like it's sugar steroids. Like they're getting very good at making really concentrated sugar. So you might touch on that later on, but I just throw it out there that I think that's one thing people well, sugar's been around forever, and that's why, like she said, if it was a new additive, it would be full. But it's sugar, but the sugar's not the same. I mean, it's kind of like a drug that they've fine-tuned it to a crazy level here.
Yeah, well, that's the whole beauty of high fructose corn syrup, is that it's, I believe the number's 40% less expensive than sugar. And so that's why they do it. And then you look at then how it impacts the body. It's let me think of an analogy that really hits home. When you look at the indigenous tribes in the Medellin cartel, Colombia, and they were growing the coca leaf, and they would actually chew on the coca leaf, and it didn't cause addiction issues. They probably, as I recall, use it much like we do coffee. But what happened? They took that leaf, then turn it into a fine white powder, and look what it does to the body. Uh, when you look at growing wheat itself in its raw kind of form really is you can't say there's some issues about this new gluten-free stuff, but in general, eating wheat in its more raw or unprocessed form doesn't create near the problem of taking that and grinding it down into a white powder. Even chewing on a sugar cane is not really that impactful. But what did they do? They then grinding it down to a what? A fine powder. And it's just taking the fiber out of the product. They're taking the vitamins out of the product. They're taking the enzymes. All those other elements that nature kind of gave it, and just putting it into these foods, which we'll get into the addiction issue shortly. But yeah, it's a good point, Bodee, because what we're dealing with is it's not only not the same kind of sugar. We didn't even eat near this much. I mean, the number I was looking at the other day was, if you look into the 1800s, the people drank. If you were to look at a can of Coke and the sugar in that, they drank about. Not drank, but they ate enough food to generate about in a week's time. They ate enough food to generate about enough sugar that's in a can of Coke. Today's society in 1 week does about 20 Cokes.
Oh, yeah.
So that's at that 2,000% figure. Mm-hmm. So it's just a whole nother ball game. And now we talked about diabetes, obesity, and let's see, we talked about heart disease. Now let's look at cancer. Cancer rates are increasing, and Lewis Cantley, who was a Harvard professor, was hired by Cornell University to bring together the dream team of professionals to really solve the mysteries of cancer and try to cure this. And one of the primary discoveries they made in their initial research was sugar is driving cancer. Let's see if I got his quote here. He says, "I think eating too much sugar can definitely increase the probability of cancer and make the outcome of people that already have cancer worse." He says, when we eat sugar, it causes an insulin spike that is a catalyst for certain cancers. 1/3 of all cancers have insulin receptors on their surface. When the insulin hits the receptors, it tells the cancer cell to start consuming glucose, and then it takes up the glucose in the bloodstream to grow. And again, you say, well, does that make sense? Well, it really does. I mean, he's just, in a scientific manner, uncovered what we're seeing in society today. Cancer is growing. And so, yes, there's other environmental factors and stress, but you can again, it really tracks almost identical to our sugar consumption. And the next topic that was you already mentioned it, Bodee, was Alzheimer's, and that is another huge problem coming down the road, because when you look at these diseases, some of these diseases are just crushing to the healthcare system, because the cost of taking care of an Alzheimer's patient it's just very expensive. Same thing with the diabetes patient. These are not inexpensive diseases. It takes a whole infrastructure to take care of these people. And Braun University did a very interesting study. They fed rats the equivalent of the North American diet of sugars and fats, and the study showed that rats' brains were damaged. Normal rats were turned into demented animals and unable to remember the stuff they learned the day before. And it looked just like Alzheimer's. And that's where they started coming up with a theory that Alzheimer's appears to be diabetes of the brain, because all this sugar is causing the brain to become insulin resistant. And if you think about it, if you know anything about fitness, you know that people that diet hard for their competitions or photo shoots, they typically go on low-carb diets. And what's their complaint about a low-carb diet? That They can't think. It's kind of a foggy brain syndrome because the brain loves sugar. And so when you're overloading it with sugar, then it starts becoming resistant, and that opens the door, apparently, to Alzheimer's. And again, I don't want to state that as fact. Right now it appears to be theory. But there was a study done in New England that showed that people, even without diabetes, but with above normal blood sugar levels, had an increased risk of developing dementia. So, again, I don't want to keep beating a dead horse here, but I'm hoping as I just keep layering this stuff on during this talk that it moves you from going, well, hey, maybe this is a bigger problem. I mean, it's not exhibiting itself like maybe the tobacco industry normally would, where you've got that feeling that the product just doesn't feel good and doesn't smell good and agitates your lungs. Sugar is pleasurable, but it really is. It's just deadly. Let me see. I've got a couple other areas I wanted to take it. You know what? This probably would be a good time to talk about the addictive nature of sugar, because and this goes back to when I was working with the transformation clients. It was shocking to me that even the people that were really dedicated could not effectively deal with that craving for over a long period of time. And as I drilled into this topic, and I couldn't understand what was it about sugar necessarily that made it more difficult, for example, than salt or fat or some of these other things. Well, studies came out that just recently. Brain PET scans showed that sugar stimulates the pleasure centers of the brain more than cocaine. And they're saying now there's indications that sugar is actually 8 times more addictive. Now, people would say, are you kidding me? Look at the detrimental effect of cocaine. There's an important distinction here. We're not saying cocaine has a different effect on the body that disrupts your ability to operate socially, but it doesn't necessarily tear your body up or create like sugar. Yes, doesn't create the same kind of high, but if you look at how it stimulates the pleasure centers of the brain, it makes total sense. I mean, how many people on this that are listening tonight can say they've gone a day without eating sugar? And if you've gone a day, what does it feel like day 2? Yeah. Everybody's got to have that sweet treat. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
And
it's a major problem.
It really is, and it's very subtle. It's very subtle. And in fact, when they did a study on rats, and they showed that the rats actually preferred sugar to cocaine, and that sugar creates this pleasure center pleasure in the brain by creating kind of an innate process in the brain via kind of a dopamine and opiate kind of pathway, which again is just incredibly powerful in terms of kind of a feel-good sensation. And so you've heard that famous line in these weight loss program or weight loss products that say, you're gaining weight, it's not your fault. And trying to take the responsibility away from the person. And in this case, I really have to say, it's very difficult to really place all the responsibility on people, and they beat themselves up. They really think poorly of themselves, and they have poor willpower, and their self-esteem goes down. And what's just on a side note, as I work especially with women, and women that are in their 30s and 40s, I find that they're increasingly depressed and frustrated and beat down because they've tried diet after diet after diet, and they can't stick with it. And they're mad at themselves. But what they don't realize is that the sugar is a powerful addictive agent, and it's in almost everything. So and Bodee, I think you would appreciate this because when I was originally doing the transformation program, and then you did it the next year. Correct. And remember, I had you make those trays of food, and there was no sugar in it. So I really, I stumbled into this luckily. But as I tell people, you get your tray of food, you have your mixed vegetables and your chicken breast and maybe a little rice, and just eat that. Just eat that, and you maybe have some oatmeal in the morning, and maybe use a little Splenda at the time, I think, or Equal, which was the big sweetener back then, I think we were talking about. But long story short is, if you can get somebody away from sugar for about 30 days,
Yeah.
it's miraculous. It's miraculous.
Well, it's miraculous mentally, but also physically. The
Yeah.
results you get when you cut sugar, and I'm not, it's hard to just zero sugar, but when you stay within, what'd you say, the 6 to 9,
Yeah.
teaspoons a day, when you stick to that and really take that sugar content down, your body will react and you will start getting results. And no lie, and that's when you start seeing it. And it's a discipline, but then it goes back to now. It's almost like you're going through withdrawals on a drug. I mean,
You are going withdrawals.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, the study with the rats, another study with rats on sugar water diet showed signs of addiction, binging, craving, and withdrawals. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we all intuitively go through every time we go through this. So, those on the call, don't beat yourself up. Just know that the key is you've got to really focus on staying away from it long enough, which we won't cover that in this call. I think that'll be something for another time. But what I wanted to do now is I want to give everybody's brain a rest on all these studies and statistics, and I want to bring
Now the fun stuff. This is the real life stuff.
Yeah, right. Well, it's important because it's tough when you sit there and listen to me spout off all this stuff and go, well, what does that mean to me? I mean, okay, so when I go out to the restaurant, how much sugar am I really eating?
Okay, Drew, we know sugar's bad. Okay, we get it. Now what?
You got it. Well, I could have done page after page after page, but I just wanted to do just a brief, just kind of a potpourri of restaurants and give you an idea of what you're eating. I just picked Applebee's, and I looked on the menu, and I said, hey, there's the riblets platter. A riblets platter. Well, it's primarily meat, so you kind of think, well, that's going to be kind of a paleo kind of thing. Well, you sit down and have that dinner, and you're going to have 23 teaspoons of sugar. Okay, now remember,
23 teaspoons.
23 for your dinner. Now, that doesn't include if you have iced tea and you want to put something in your iced tea.
Or a Coke. Or a
Coke.
Or
Or anything that you had for lunch, or anything that you had for breakfast. Okay, so right, the very first example gives you an understanding of when somebody says that people are eating an average of 26 teaspoons a day, you can just see quickly in one meal that appears to not be full of sugar is full of sugar.
I would say 26 is almost an understatement. When you start talking about these things, it's like you start adding it up, and that's crazy.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point, and that is, I'm sure there's people on the call like you and I, Bodee, that don't eat 26 teaspoons a day. Okay, but that's the average.
Right.
So that means a whole bunch of people are eating well more than that. Mm-hmm. But at least gives people a starting point as, hey, you can just see in my very first example out of the gate, something that's really not considered sweet is pushing you well over the thing, not considering any drinks or any other meals during the day. And as you know, notoriously breakfast foods are typically sweet. Mm-hmm. So let's go to energy drinks. I'm just going random categories. When you look at something like a Rockstar or a Monster, if you're drinking one can, you're getting 14 teaspoons of sugar.
Now, how many of us know people or kids or adults that will drink 3 and 4 of those things a day?
Well, yeah. I mean, and if it's not that, it's a can of Coke.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and again, if you look at the studies, this is the kind of sugar that is damaging to the body. This is the kind of sugar that it really adds belly fat. Starbucks, huge chain, obviously. Looked at their green tea, kind of a healthy frappuccino, 22 teaspoons. And I looked at their menu, not to just, because I could have gone on and on with that, but I just kind of did an overall tabulation. And if you look at Starbucks energy or just specialty drinks, not just their coffee, But if you look at their specialty drinks, virtually all their specialty drinks are ranging from 12 teaspoons to 18 teaspoons. Okay,
Wow.
so can you imagine, let's say you're at the 18 teaspoon level on your drink, and then you order one of their pastries, which I didn't even put on the list. So you've just blown through your, 3 days worth of sugar consumption in your very first outing in the morning. And
Hey,
guys, and
real
this
quick,
is,
real quick, Drew. I mean, that's powerful. And it's crazy. Real quick, explain to people the grams to teaspoons, because you're doing it in teaspoons, and that's what blows your mind. And I think
yeah,
everybody needs to do the grams to teaspoon conversion.
yeah,
What do they look at?
thank you. I skipped right over one of the key points of the talk, Woody. Thank you. And that is this. This is the trick of the industry. They try to throw this out in grams. And people just go, well, I don't know what grams are. And you can't wrap your mind around grams. So everybody write this down, because it is the key computation here. Whatever the grams are, divide by 4. Whatever it says, if it says 20 grams, divide that by 4. There you go, through five teaspoons. That tells you how many teaspoons. So whatever the grams are, divide that by 4, and that tells you how many teaspoons. And that gives you a real-world example, because, the thing that people miss in all this is, if I sat you down and gave you a glass of water and then dumped 20 teaspoons in it, would you really have that for breakfast? That's what we're doing. I mean, that's the insanity of all this, is we've magically doctored it up and done all this stuff to really disguise what we're doing to our body. I did a couple things with McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts, and I won't keep going on and on, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to blow your mind here, I think, maybe, is give you a real understanding of what's going on in the marketplace. Looked at McDonald's and said, well, what is their, let's look at the menu. I'll take a frozen strawberry lemonade.
That sounds healthy. It's got strawberries in it.
Yes. 35 teaspoons. 35 teaspoons. And guys, just don't listen to me. Really take that in. One drink. That doesn't include your food. That doesn't include nothing. One drink is 35 teaspoons. Then you can get the Southern style frozen strawberry lemonade extra large at McDonald's. 39 teaspoons. 39 teaspoons. And people start asking me, well, is sugar really that bad? You tell me. How in the world can anybody justify eating 39 teaspoons of sugar and think that's healthy in any way, shape, or form, or responsible?
Well, and then,
responsible.
yeah, that's one drink, and then if you totaled up what that person ate throughout the day, they're probably at 60, 70 teaspoons of sugar that day.
And there's where the cardiac disease comes in. There's where the diabetes comes in. And our kids are notorious for this. How many parents just don't know this and think, well, they're going to get their kid well, I'll give you an example. At Dunkin' Donuts, I'm going to get the large peach tea. It's kind of fruity tea, large peach tea. That's going to be low in sugar. 20 teaspoons. 20 teaspoons. Let's see. Oh, I'm going to get the kid the high C orange lava burst. I'm giving my kid 21 teaspoons of sugar. But he, like, Mom, my dad, I want the high C drink. You get it, 21 teaspoons of sugar on that small body. But I'm going to wrap this up with a real mind blower, and that is, I ran across a drink at Dunkin' Donuts called the Vanilla Bean Colada. The Vanilla Bean Colada. Bodee, you have a guess?
Since your last one was 39, I would say it would be more than 39.
More than 39. You are right. 43.5 teaspoons of sugar. Okay, so guys, I just bored you with about 30 minutes of facts and figures and science, and now this translates to the real world. Who in their right mind would sit down and scoop out 43 teaspoons of sugar and drink it? And who in their right mind would ever even think that's healthy? That really is this, and that culminates kind of this whole talk is This is what it's about, guys. This is what's going on in our society. I'm just pointing out one drink, not 3 meals. Can you imagine what this does to a child's body that, you know, has a half our body weight, that are still drinking all these drinks? So once again, I think I go back to the term, you know, sugar tsunami, and I really think it's appropriate because just like a real tsunami does mass devastation, this sugar tsunami is just devastating the human landscape in terms of obesity and disease. And it's going to take these kind of talks. It's going to take continued effort, just like the sugar lobbyists did, to really stop this. I know this is probably going to fly in the face of some people that are very conservative, but you know, when Sarah Palin gets up there with her big big gulp cup and goes, "No one's going to tell me what to eat," you know, and yeah, I'm torn about this, guys. I don't want the government telling me what I can and cannot eat. But can you understand where big business sugar comes in and big corporations come in? I mean, in my mind, if they're going to serve that, then they have a responsibility of paying this health care bill. Or they have a responsibility to put something on that drink that says this is damaging to your health. I mean, there's got to be some balance here. And I think that's where I'm at with all this. And that's kind of been one of my crusades and why I'm really devoting a lot of time and attention, you know, to this and trying to approach it from a factual standpoint and then give people some real-world examples on how they are living their life every day, blowing out their, you know, their body with all this sugar kind of unknowingly. And ultimately, it'll manifest itself in diabetes, heart attacks, stroke, those kind of things.
I think it's super important, too, those that are listening on the webinar and watching it, is that, you know, one of the factors with the wellness revolution and those that, you know, are with me in natural healthcare and want to reduce your toxins in your life, it is so awesome that that's the terminology you're using, is that sugar is a toxin. You got to keep that in mind because it's just like anything that, you know, we're trying to reduce in our lives. A lot of them we can't get out of our lives completely, and you can't sugar completely, but it is a toxin that you want to do your homework, investigate, start watching labels, make right choices. That's how these big industries are going to stop selling it, is if you quit buying it, you know, and that's the thing. But it also takes a great awareness of letting people know what's in these things and what it's going to do to you. So I think it's great that we got to label sugar as a toxin. We have to.
Well, I think that's kind of the first step, like we did with tobacco, really uncover the fact that it's really bad for us and what it's doing. I really want to end on 2 points, and one is people ask me about fruit, and Bodee, if you remember years ago, I was not a fan of fruit. I mean, I felt like it gave me too many sugars, but I have to say that I've changed my tune a little bit on that, especially as I've gotten older. I find that there's the current research is showing, surprisingly, that as long as you're eating fruit in its absolute form, not juice and not juicing, but actually, if you want to have, let's say, for example, apple, put it in a blender, not a juicer. Get that pulp in there as well. If you do that, it's almost non-impactful. It's not even remotely at the same level as high fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to bring up because people ask me that all the time. Well, how can I cut out sugars? What about fruits? And I remember what you told me is your body is much more capable of digesting that fruit, and your body knows that it's natural and it doesn't process it the same way and spike your insulin levels like
right.
high fructose.
And when I told you that years ago, it was just based on kind of past bodybuilding lore and, you know, kind of hit and miss on diets. Now the science is confirmed that you shouldn't be afraid of fruits. Doesn't mean you necessarily want to go overboard, but don't be afraid. That's not saying, well, you know, this cantaloupe or this strawberry, these blueberries have a little bit of sugar. It's great. It has antioxidants, enzymes, vitamins. So it's really healthy for you. As I know, guys, I've really droned on and bad news upon bad news, but I really want to end on a positive note, and that is there is light at the end of this tunnel. And just want to let you know that there's good news, that there are ways to win the battle over sugar. um, I think when I come on next time, Bodie, I'll talk about one of the products I'm working with that really takes care of that craving immediately. You know, one of the problems with having to rely on willpower is you're sitting there looking at that cookie or looking at that pastry and looking at some of these things, and it hits you right now. You can't take some of these appetite suppressants and some of these things or meditation strategies and all these different things they have you do. It doesn't really deal with the craving right now. And that's the focus of my research and you know, the way I'm approaching dealing with sugar. And on a secondary note, I'm putting together information on how to go out into the world that is, you know, again with a plethora and just a flood of sugar-filled products, and how do you begin working yourself through that maze. And again, I want to say the good news is, if you're motivated and aware of sugar, there are many, many good options. So don't feel that in ending this talk that it's, you know, hopeless. I want you to now know the truth about sugar, but now know there's really good news coming down the road about all you need to do is be aware of the sugar, and then you can start easily kind of winding your way through even going to McDonald's and going to Starbucks and going to different places. You can go those places and find good solutions. So on that note, Bodie, I thank you for having me. I hope the listeners didn't get beat up too much.
Yeah, real quick too, anyone out there that has any questions, I'll open it up here for a couple minutes to see if anybody has any questions.
Oh, great.
Yeah, see if we can see if anybody sparked anybody's curiosity here. But I want to say too, we're going to bring Drew on. I'm hoping every month to have different topics. The sugar topic alone, I mean, we can do probably, 4 or 5 different segments on sugar alone, how to deal with it, cravings, different options, all those kind of things. So, but that doesn't even tap into the whole other side of the knowledge that Drew has on fitness, exercise, training, things to do for us middle-aged people that, you know, our bodies don't work like they used to. Drew's really, I think, you know, revolutionizing some areas for fitness for us middle-aged guys that and women that want to transform and, you know, and just be empowered, be able to do things in your life. I'm not saying you have to look. I mean, everybody saw Drew's pictures, right? I mean, he gets shredded and he can do that. He's got really super focus. He's one of the most focused guys I've ever seen. But for those, you don't have to look like that. I mean, what we're talking about fitness level is your fitness level. I mean, being able to do things with your kids, being able to go hiking, camping, fishing, whatever that is, and not just not be able to do it physically, right? We want you to be able to mentally and physically be able to live. So I think those are the topics we're going to cover later on. Am I right, Drew?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be able to talk about things other than sugar because we live at a time where there are tremendous studies out there that are telling us more than ever about the body, and especially as we age. And I found that as I've gotten older, the information that I gave when I was in my 30s is different now than when I'm 52. And so what I found is that the programs like P90X and Insanity and all this stuff, it's good information, and it works, and there's just a huge number of people on the internet that give that kind of information. But if you start looking at, as we get a little older, we're dealing with some different issues, and even from a nutrition standpoint, we're not able to handle the foods we once were able to handle, and there's new science about what we really should be eating, aside from not eating sugar. And I look forward to talking about that because I think it will really give people some tremendous insight and confidence in knowing if they'll be willing to implement some of these strategies, they're going to be able to live, you know, happy, strong, active lives for many years to come. And it's not rocket science. It's just implementing some a little bit different strategies than you would, let's say, when you're in your 30s, and implementing some of the new science we find out there.
Question from Natalie Rigby. It's a good question. Is there a good sugar substitute out there?
So far, the leader in the category is stevia. And the longer stevia is out there, it seems to be holding its own. What I mean by that, if you think about Splenda, Equal, a lot of these other sweeteners, they come out with a big bang, but ultimately they start fading. Stevia, again, seems to be something that um, is not producing any real adverse effects that I'm aware of. And I'm also seeing that in smaller doses, sugar alcohols, like for example, I at Starbucks they don't have stevia, but they have the sugar alcohols. So I'll get like 2 or 3 pumps of sugar-free vanilla, sugar-free caramel, and you just have to be slightly aware if you use higher levels, it can cause a little gas. Those seem to be pretty darn safe. And so I would say stevia and maltitol was one of the sugar alcohols that I think is good, but that's the two main categories. Um, and if you don't mind me throwing one more point in, um, what I found in working with my clients is that our taste buds are so overstimulated. We had it's a tough transition period to start eating things with less sugar on it, less sweeteners. I mean, for those that like to load their tea down with even artificial sweeteners, start tapering off. You're going to find a very interesting thing occurs. For those of you that have been around long enough that drank whole milk, and then when skim milk came out, it was like, oh, it's terrible, I won't have it, but you still stuck with it, and now you can't go back to whole milk. For those of you that used to maybe drink a regular Coke and went to Diet Coke and then try to go back to regular Coke, it just, you can't, it's not right to go back. It doesn't feel right. That's exactly what happens with your taste buds and sugar. If you can tape yourself down, you're going to find that you don't even need to sugar your foods like you used to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Drew, because, early on, when we were cutting sugar out back in the day and still, I can't I can't eat sugar like I used to. Even if I do eat a cookie or ice cream, I get sick. Like it's not pleasing anymore to do that. So, after a bite or two, I'm like, it just overwhelms me anymore. So you really do adapt to, not needing that sugar anymore.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think it just, I mean, I was so fortunate back when I did the transformation that I just stumbled into some of this stuff. I mean, not eating sugar for 30 days, most people don't do that. I mean, it's just something you wouldn't normally undertake. And in this case, I was, under the constraints of the contest and trying to change my body quickly. I stumbled into that. And I found that that really kind of was the holy grail in breaking free. But that's as easy as that sounds. It's very difficult to stay away. But it all makes sense. We're just loaded with sugar. Our taste buds are loaded. Our brains are overstimulated. And if you can just take this information and go, you know what, I may not win the battle of eliminating it all today, but how about if I just cut back just a little bit? How about maybe I put half the amount of sugar in? Or how about if I, maybe put even half the amount of artificial sweetener in, just taper it down? You're going to be shocked and proud of yourself. That's the important thing. People start regaining confidence in their ability to actually take control of their lives again. I found the people that don't, that sugar just tears them up and they feel out of control. So that's very empowering to be able to do that.
Great. Well, Drew, again, great information. Glad you could make it, and hopefully we can.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, hopefully we'll just do this once a month, and depending on topic, I think this next sugar series will at least do probably 3 or 4 at least to get some good information out of the sugar topics, and then lead into all the other. That's going to tie into a lot of things. I mean, it really does.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to tie into that show, I promise you I'm not going to beat you over the head with all those facts and figures again, so it'll be probably a more fun show. In fact, Bodee, what I'll probably do is just send you out the product and let you try it on camera.
Awesome.
Yeah, because without divulging too much, this product works in 60 seconds. So it's a fun product to try. It'll be fun to watch Bodee's face, and it's shocking how effective it is. So we'll plan on that next time.
All right. I appreciate everybody for joining us, and hopefully you got some good information out of it. Keep liking our Facebook page. Get on there. We'll have great bits of knowledge on there. Drew will also do a few postings out there on topics related to this. So Appreciate you joining us, and we will see you next time.